Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, and I am joined by an even better host, an all-around better person, if we're being honest, a beautiful IDP mind coming to us live from the Sode Shack, from the IDP show, the magnificent Josh Raymer. Joshy, what's up, my friend?
John, it is wonderful to be here. The forces were trying to conspire to keep us apart tonight. We had a power outage here at Casa de Raymer. Power came back on just in time for the episode, so I'm #blessed to be here. It has been, it was a long, fun off season. We're looking down the barrel of week 4 now, which is crazy to me. We're almost a month into the NFL season. And it was a fun offseason, though, man. We got to do a lot of cool stuff, but without a doubt, my favorite part of this offseason was the John Macri glow up. Watching you get to come and take the reins of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, get a weekly IDP episode in season. Hell, you were on NFL Network, brother. So it was awesome to see. We are here for Macri season, and I'm delighted to be on this episode with you.
Well, thank you, man. That's very kind of you to say. And yeah, I wish I could have got some IDP info out on NFL Network. That would have been amazing. But they run a tight ship over there. I don't think they would have let me say anything other than what I was supposed to. So that was fun. But yeah, it has been a fun off season. We got to do the draft down in Kentucky, which was fun. Get together with you and the gang, and that was my highlight of the offseason for sure. But excited to get to talk to you again here, get you on the podcast, talk some IDP, preview week 4. Like you said, it's crazy. We're already almost a month into the season. So lots to talk about for sure.
Yeah, let's get into it. You're a great IDP mind. You're a terrible golfer, but a fantastic friend. And I'm excited to, chop it up, talk some week 4. Lots of stuff to dig into. We've been talking about on our recap episodes, IDP scoring. And maybe this is just the first month of the season. Offenses are still figuring things out, but IDP scoring has been going bananas. And I have really, if you're on the offensive side, maybe you guys feel the sting a little bit with some of these other episodes, but in IDP land, it's like, we're having the time of our lives over here, baby.
Yeah, there's not a lot of there's Devin A. Chain and Raheem Mostert over on the offensive side, some Keenan Allen stuff, but yeah, man, it's the IDP stuff has been crazy so far, and yeah, some of it is like the early part of the season too. We always have these like big scorers who come off of like three interceptions in 3 games or something like that to open the year or whatever it ends up being. But it all ends up evening out in the end. But it's always fun to kind of get into the IDP stuff early as that hype goes up to start the year. But yeah, man, we're going to get into it all. We're going to go game by game here. We're going to hit on the key points of interest from each team and each game. I'll have the timestamps as well in the episode description for the YouTubes and the audio as well, so you can jump around to find the games that you're looking for and hopefully get the information you need. I'll also include a link to the IDP fantasy report, which has all the week's waiver wire targets, snap shares, and utilization for every single IDP from week 3. Plenty of notes as in there as well. And that's free on pff.com. Can't ask for a better deal than that. But then I'll also include the link to my rankings as well for those interested in the episode description. But with all that said, I'm excited to get into it here. Before we do, I do have to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. Fall is all about the back to school and back to routine checklist. And the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future, starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it quick, easy, and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy and eetfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Josh, let's kick things off with the Thursday night football game. We got a division game here, the NFC North. Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. I'll let you kick us off. What do you want to start with here with either one of these teams?
Can we get Jack Campbell some more run, John?
Oh, man,
is that too much to ask? You would think at this point Dan Campbell's namesake would be getting on the field more based on what he's been able to do thus far. We saw what Jack Campbell could do in week 3 with the few snaps he was given. Just 57% of snaps. He had 6 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 sack, and 1 QB hit. And so that performance has me thinking that the Prince of Midgard, or Prince of Asgard, as you like to say, wherever you want this prince to be from, is not long for a full-time role. What do you think is the kind of long-term or season-long outlook for this linebacker situation? Because I know what it should be, but what's it going to be?
Yeah, it's hard to say, and I just have this like terrible feeling that it's Alex Anzalone LB1 for the entire season, unless he gets hurt or something like that. I just don't see them kind of going away from him. I think best case scenario for Jack Campbell is that he gets the LB2 job there, which may not still be a part-time role, but at least be the kind of clear second snap leader among that linebacker core on a weekly basis. The problem with Anzalone, he's so inefficient. This is why we don't like him, right? He's
so bad. He's so bad, John.
He's got a 7.4% tackle efficiency, which is nearly 50% of what the average is for linebackers, right? And that's with the Lions playing much more zone this year than they have in the past, which theoretically should help. But this man just continues to be one of the biggest plugs in IDP. He just isn't getting it done. IDP managers are frustrated, especially after the Lions spent a first-round pick on Jack Campbell, which we assumed meant that they would give him a chance to start, but it doesn't seem like it's going to go that way. So for now, we deal with it. Alex Anzalone probably the only one actually worth trusting on a weekly basis because 56% of snaps for Jack Campbell, as nice as that production was last week, getting in a sack in there, it's just not sustainable week to week.
Yeah, I'm fine trusting Anzalone right now. Season long, I really do believe deep in my heart of hearts that Jack Campbell takes this role. I just think he's too good to keep off the field, especially if this team is pushing for the playoffs. I think they want to get their playmakers on the field, Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, Jack Campbell, and just give the rookie a little more time to learn the defense. You see this a lot. Teams use the bye week to replace players that are not playing well in the defense, especially if they're younger players. So I have optimism for Jack Campbell. Like you said, even if it's not the LB1 role, which maybe it's just a spidey sense, I think he has a chance to snatch that role as well. But I do think he'll ascend to a full-time LB2 role. But if we could get him north of like 70% of snaps, I think that would be a big win for IDP. And I still think he could be a solid option even on that kind of volume, just because he's a much better player than Alex Anzalone. He doesn't need 100% of snaps. So, but on the Green Bay Packers side, football giveth and football taketh away, right? We have Rashawn Gary coming back from injury. He's been getting eased in, looks phenomenal. You had the massive week 3 on just, 37% of snaps, I believe, something like that. So I'm not trusting him right now. I'm not rolling him out until we see those snaps tick up a little bit. Sure. But that is the league winner type of upside you've got with Gary. If no setbacks, they'll continue to ramp this guy up. So very excited about Rashawn Gary's end of season outlook. Mm-hmm. And then on the taketh away side, Devondre Campbell, my flag plant, my top 12 linebacker to be, my most rostered linebacker, I think outside of Deion Jones. What the hell's up with that? Coming back around, though. He is out, and thankfully it doesn't seem to be a serious injury, but I do think he's going to miss the game on Thursday, it sounds like. Isaiah McDuffie is the pickup there. Hopefully we get Campbell back in the lineup. The Campbell Bros. We could have had a Campbell Bros showdown, but thus is life. We are bound to be disappointed, I guess.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? And yeah, it seems like Devondre Campbell already ruled out for this week. It was a short week, so it seemed unlikely in the first place that he was going to play after leaving the game early last week and then not coming back into it. So Isaiah McDuffie should play about an 80% role. We'll be hovering around there, but this is a decent defense for tackle efficiency for linebackers, so he could be productive. I think he's worth adding on the waiver wires. Green Bay is the most zone heavy defense in the NFL, which does yield better tackle efficiency for linebackers. But yeah, the big one I think for Green Bay, like you mentioned, for me at least, it is Rashawn Gary. I have him as like edge 38 this week, so I don't have him very high. I'm with you. I'm not trusting him in lineups just yet, but you look at the numbers, man, and he has been so impressive coming off that torn ACL. 31.8% win rate, which is second in the league behind only Myles Garrett among edge defenders. He's already got 4 sacks, 13 pressures, which is a 29% pressure rate, which also leads the league. He's done all of this on just 45 pass rush snaps. So man, I don't know. This feels like comeback player of the year for me. I know DeMar Hamlin is the favorite. He's been a healthy scratch for 3 weeks straight now. Rashawn Gary plus 7,500 on DraftKings right now for comeback player of the year. I looked that up before we started recording here, and that is a pretty impressive number. If you want to throw $5 down, it's almost 400 or so return if you can hit that. But I think for Rashawn Gary, the Packers have an early bye this year, week 6. So I think week 7 is where we see Rashawn Gary kind of get that full workload. And that's probably where I'll start trusting him in lineups. But you can do it now. It's just a bit riskier given the snap count. And it's not an easy matchup this week against the Detroit O-line, which ranks 6th in pass blocking grade.
Yeah. Hopeful for a good long-term season outlook for him, but let's pump the brakes here. And just hope for brighter days ahead. Brighter days ahead for him and Devondre Campbell. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it here on Packers Lions.
I'm with you. Let's go on to the Sunday slate and start with the London game. So we do have a London game this week early Sunday morning. This game will be played, so don't get caught with your lineup not getting set properly. This does happen to people who aren't paying attention. Just another reminder out there: Atlanta, Jacksonville playing in London this week. I guess the first thing here that is probably worth noting is that Devin Lloyd is going to be out a couple of weeks, Jacksonville's linebacker. So last week he did play through the hand injury, but he was coming in and out of the lineup, like on and off the field, I guess I should say. He was rotating in and out with Chad Muma. So that kind of gave me pause last week or this past week, in that maybe it was happening again, that Chad Muma was kind of working his way and starting to eat away at some of those Devin Lloyd snaps. But it turns out he is dealing with an injury and is expected to miss a couple of weeks. So Chad Muma is somebody that we can pick up off the waiver wire and expect to play an every down role. I have him as my LB23 this week, going against a run-heavy offense in the Atlanta Falcons. I think there's potential there for some tackles for Chad Muma as a low-end LB2. If you're able to pick him up and plug him into lineups early. But yeah, how are you feeling about this Jacksonville linebacker situation?
I mean, not great outside of Foye Oluokun, who is LB1, depending on how you feel about Roquan Smith. Mm-hmm. But we knew with Devin Lloyd that the Chad Muma axe was hanging over his head all offseason. And I'm glad to hear, though, that it was an injury, because I was worried that it was actually being benched in that game. Right. So, yeah, I mean, anytime Chad Muma comes in, I think he's a viable LB2-3 option for you. But outside of Foye, I feel like you're just playing with fire because we've seen Devin Lloyd get benched before. Now, it hasn't happened this season. Will he get his job back once he returns to form, once the thumb is healed up? It's not a major injury, so that's good. But I'll be very curious, this kind of tryout for Chad Muma the next few weeks in Devin Lloyd's absence. How well does he play? Right. So I don't know, man. It's outside of Foye, I'm a little bit dicey on the whole thing.
Yeah, I feel you. We had the rug pulled out from under us last year, right? With Devin Lloyd, he had that hot start, and then it kind of crumbled after that. So it was about this time last year that we started to see this exact same thing, right? But luckily, yeah, it seems to be an injury for now, but definitely a situation worth monitoring going forward, and when Devin Lloyd gets back in the lineup. But it does help to have just Chad Muma in the lineup this week and not have to worry about Devin Lloyd kind of playing into that. So the next couple weeks, at least, it does seem like Chad Muma should be a viable option. Other things on Jacksonville, I got their edge defenders here. I mean, Josh Allen, I think, is really the one for me. I think this could be a big tackle game for Josh Allen here. If he gets a sack, that's obviously even better, obviously. But he is one of the best run defending edges in the league, going up against one of the most run heavy teams in the league. Allen ranked 7th in run defense grade so far this year, 82.2. Not easy to tackle Bijan, but I think he should at least get plenty of opportunities to do so at the very least. So I do still like Josh Allen quite a bit. I still think I have him inside of my top 10 edges. I know he's been quiet the past 2 weeks, but he definitely has that blow up potential. Not as excited about Trayvon Walker, though.
Yeah, we talked about it on the week 3 recap pod this week that Trayvon's average at about 10 points a game right now. So it just feels like we're still a couple years away from him really realizing that potential. There's been flashes. I'm not worried about another Clelin Ferrell situation where a highly drafted edge is just a complete and utter bust. But for IDP purposes, yeah, I'm interested in Josh Allen, but he's always been a little frustrating. Mm-hmm. He has every edge has quiet weeks, right? Myles Garrett had quiet weeks and then goes off for 40 plus points. So you have to be patient. Josh Allen, like you said, he falls into that bucket for me. Now he's on the borderline, but he falls into that bucket for me of too good not to start. Right. Now it all depends on the depth of your league, right? If you're only starting like one defensive lineman, maybe he doesn't make the cut, depending on how many teams are in your league. But I think every week he's in consideration for me as a top 12 edge just because we've seen what this guy can do. And if the right matchup comes along, you could be looking at a 25 to 35 point output from Josh Allen.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's still one of the top options for me. He has the pass rush metrics behind him. He's got the volume behind him. So we love that. Trayvon Walker has the volume, doesn't necessarily have the pass rush metrics yet. So hopefully he does get there as that former number 1 overall pick, but remains to be seen at this point. Looking at Atlanta, there is another injury to the linebacker situation over there. Troy Anderson is on IR. It looks like he's done for the year with a shoulder injury. This was a major bummer. I thought it was a breakout year for Troy Anderson coming in year 2, taking over that full-time role, but not obviously what we were looking for here with a start like this. So he'll be done for the year. And it looks like Nate Landman, who literally nobody has ever heard of, could potentially be in for a full-time role going forward. We'll see if they bring anyone in, Rashaan Evans potentially being the one that stands out the most. But otherwise, I mean, Nate Landman, nobody drafted this guy in any league, so he'll be on a ton of waiver wires. But funny enough, he hasn't played that much, but 87.9 PFF grade this year, which is 3rd among all linebackers. So pretty good. It's a super small sample size, but maybe they feel like he's playing well enough so far that they don't need to bring anybody in.
Look, when you have a sister named Ocean Trail Landman, who's a swimmer, I don't need to hear anything else. I'm in.
Ocean Trail?
Ocean Trail Landman. I am not making this up. You can Google it. But Nate Landman will be doing his work on land. Yeah, it's just such a bummer, dude. It's so hard in the wake of these injuries to be like, oh yeah, this guy that no one has ever heard of, to transfer the excitement we had for the 10 RAS freak of nature athlete Troy Anderson, to transfer that on to Nate freaking Landman.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. It's hard. But you're right. If he does get the full-time role, if they don't bring anybody in, that could be a nice little waiver wire ad there.
And that's all it is, right? That's all we're hoping for, is we're hoping for that full-time role, because that itself will create production. If he can be efficient on a weekly basis, that's great. If he can outproduce expectations, that's even better, right? Like, this is why we don't want to spend, a ton of draft capital on linebackers in fantasy drafts every single year, because every single year there are the Nate Landmans of the world that we can pick up off waiver wires. And hopefully this one can be productive. We will find out going forward, I guess, but we'll be interested to see that one Sunday morning.
That is a Avengers reject if I've ever heard one. Or maybe that's like the aquatic characters, like human alter ego, right? I am not Ocean Man. I'm Nate Landman. I don't do anything in the ocean. So yeah,
It's
when
a
you've got
terrible.
Marvel reject heroes as your waiver wire ads, we're at a dark place already.
It's amazing. Yeah, I am still shocked by Ocean Trail, to be honest. Ocean
I
Trail
just
Landman. It just sounds
I
like a mermaid almost.
It does. It does. And she's a swimmer. Like,
That's
come on.
incredible.
I had to fact check myself, but yes, Ocean Trail Landman.
Yeah, what wow. Just great stuff there. Great research, Josh. Josh, I really
Thank you.
appreciate you bringing that
That's
to the
what I'm here
table
for.
and blowing my mind here. Um, all right, let's go on to the Cincinnati Bengals at the Tennessee Titans. What do you want to start with here, Cincinnati and Tennessee?
Dax Hill,
Yeah,
DB1 through 3 weeks, just like we all had on our bingo card, right, John?
yeah, absolutely.
26 tackles, 1 sack, 1 INT, 12.8% tackle rate. We wondered before the season how this split was going to work out with Dax Hill, with Jordan Battle, and with Nick Scott. Now, we'll say Nick Scott has been good. I mean, Dax Hill is the guy that you want. DB1, I'm using big three scoring. It's a big play scoring. So anything that you hear me reference here, that's the scoring format that we're using here. But 23 tackles for Nick Scott. The usage here was interesting, John. 40% sweet spot alignment for Hill, 53% for Scott. Hill's played 99% of snaps so far. Scott has played 85%. Do you think both these guys are startable, depending on league size?
I do. Yeah. I have them both inside of that top 20. I actually got them super close. Like I have Dax Hill. I know he's safety one. It's been on the top of big plays as well, but I have him as safety 15 right now. I got Nick Scott as safety 16. So I literally put them right beside each other because Hill definitely on fire with the big plays, but Scott has definitely, like you said, kind of gone underrated amongst the group here. He's got a top 5 tackle efficiency among safeties at 14%. He's got that primary box roll as well, like you said. And I know he had a quieter game, especially compared to Hill in week 3, but I wouldn't ignore him going forward. And I think this could be a nice game for Nick Scott going against Tennessee as well this week. So I still like Nick Scott quite a bit. And like you said, even though he had a quieter week last week, the tackle efficiency, the box roll, it's all still there for him. So I think there's definitely room for him, for both of these guys to be starters in IDP lineups.
Yeah, I think if you want to do the move of shipping off Dax Hill for Nick Scott plus, that's never a bad idea. We kind of talked about that with Jesse Bates versus Richie Grant, right? Jesse Bates is kind of coasting off the 3 interceptions so far, but Richie Grant has the better usage for IDP. So it's not a bad idea to sell high off of these early season starts for guys who it's maybe questionable if that's going to be sustainable over the course of the season. So, yeah, the other guy I wanted to talk about here for the Bengals, Jermaine Pratt. We know Logan Wilson, Mom's Meatloaf. Shout out Arn Evers for that comparison. We said that if Logan Wilson is Mom's Meatloaf, he's always solid, unspectacular, 10 to 15 points. That's Logan Wilson. Jermaine Pratt is the McRib, right? He is the more enticing option. But what this past week is like is when you find out the McRib is made from pig anus. With Logan Wilson balling out 2 interceptions on Monday Night Football and Jermaine Pratt having a quiet week. So I didn't expect Jermaine Pratt to play 90% of snaps this season. His average over the last 3 seasons, 70%. So 80% was not like surprising for me in week 3. But my question for you, John, what kind of opportunity do you think Jermaine Pratt gets rest of season?
Yeah, so I liked that he was getting up over 90% 2 weeks in a row. He didn't really get that last year. So that was nice to see, at least from the first 2 weeks. But then, yeah, dipping to 80% last week, not ideal. It's not the end of the world either, but that 10% can be a big deal depending on the week, especially in a man-heavy defense like Cincinnati, right? If they're not playing a ton of defensive snaps as well. So they played just 55 snaps this past week, which was among the bottom of the league as far as volume goes. So both of those things combined, the amount of snaps and then playing in a man-heavy defense, can be a big hit to potential production, right? So that's where I guess I get concerned about Pratt not playing a full-time role or dipping below 90%, getting in that 80 or 70% range again. It is a bit concerning for me. It's still a good option in like deeper leagues if you're playing him as an LB3 or 4, if you, depending on how deep you go, but it gets a little bit riskier here. And I don't think you would want him as your LB2 going forward.
Yeah, he feels more like an LB3 to me. Um, I think he has more boom potential probably than Logan Wilson. But yeah, it's going to be tough if he's only getting 70 to 80% of snaps to make those big plays, right? So if he can tick back up north of 90, that makes me feel better about having him as the LB2. But if we're going to get the same Jermaine Pratt we've got in years past where he's down around 70, 80%, that drops him down to like LB3 territory for me. On the Titans side, Harold Landry. What is going on there, John? You suggested I take Harold Landry and IDP madness, and now I want you to answer for your crimes.
I have to defend myself here. Yeah. So, look, he started off on the year like he's coming off the ACL. So, look, I thought that the snaps were really encouraging the first 2 weeks, right? He was up over 80%. This was typical of Tennessee because they kind of run him out there and lean into him and let him play a ton of volume. Didn't really do that this past week. They were also getting blown out. So might not be that big of a concern considering that he only played 2 snaps in the fourth quarter while they were getting blown out by the Browns. So I think they just pulled him from that game because the score was out of hand. So I think there's potential here for Harold Landry to kind of get back on track. The Bengals pass blocking hasn't been great. Burrow's kind of gimpy as well, but he is getting the ball out quickly. Second fastest time to throw in the league at 2.3 seconds. But he is still taking a fair bit of sacks. So there's hope here for Harold Landry. I think the volume role is going to be there for throughout the season as long as he's healthy. I'm not too concerned about the dip this past week because of the score in that game. So I think there's potential here for him to kind of get back on track and put up some volume-based numbers as Tennessee's top edge.
And what kind of confidence level do you have in Danico Autry? That dude has been phenomenal to start the season.
He's been amazing. Yeah, I love Danico Autry. We talked about him like 2 off seasons ago, I guess, as a value pick, and he was great last year when we talked about him, and he's continuing to do so again. Just a guy that was completely overlooked this off season. Really more of like a deep league guy that people were targeting, but he's scoring well. He's been one of the top scorers so far this season, and he's another one that the volume's there, the metrics are there. He's just a strong player that I'm happy to plug into lineups, especially if he has that DT designation, which he does on certain sites as well.
Yeah, it's like I'm looking at the top scores in our scoring. It's like, oh, there's TJ Watt, there's Micah Parsons, there's Daniil Hunter. What is Danico Autry? What are you doing in there, bud? Yeah. I think he's a top 5 or 6 edge for us right now. So just you'd love to see it. If you were scooping up Danico Autry in the offseason, you have been richly rewarded. But yeah, this should be a fun matchup. These are Titans are always scrappy, and they may suck though this year. I don't know. Yeah. The suckiness may be overwhelming the scrappiness. And then the Bengals, man, just put Burrow on IR, let him come back. I mean, or just don't hobble your franchise quarterback, your newly paid franchise quarterback, like for the entire season. I think they're just going to try to hold on rather than just taking the hit here at the end of the season. And I think it's going to end up costing them late in the year. I really do.
I hope not. That would suck to see because I love Joe Burrow and I kind of like the Bengals as well. So hopefully he gets healthier. But yeah, it's harder to get healthier in an NFL season. So we'll see what happens there. All right, let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. Not like a ton of interesting stuff from these two teams, but the one thing I guess that maybe I'll start with here is the New Orleans linebackers. So Pete Werner, Demario Davis have been kind of up and down to start the year, specifically Demario Davis. Week 1, I think Werner and Davis both had solid outings. David had a 16% tackle efficiency. Werner was around 11.5. So I was at least hopeful that Demario Davis, who has been one of the most inefficient tacklers at linebacker the past 2 seasons. Maybe this year was going to be better for him, but week 2 we saw that tackle efficiency dip again for Demario Davis down to 10.2%. Werner was around 12 again. And then week 3, Demario Davis, just a 4% tackle efficiency. So back to his old ways there, as being incredibly inefficient. But at least Werner got up to 15.4%. So this is something to kind of keep in mind with this New Orleans defense, is that the scheme here, the Saints are the second most man heavy D in the league so far this season. But also a big part of that is the history of inefficiency with Davis, which does tend to be stickier year to year than being overly efficient. He'll have his nice games, but if you see him consistently ranked lower in my ranks, I think I have him as LB40 this week. That's why. It's just a history of inefficiency with him.
Yeah, that is a pretty putrid tackle efficiency, 3.8% in week 3. Holy hell. I think I could fall into like 5 guys if they ran at me in an NFL game. Now, you'd probably be scraping my dead body off the field after 1 or 2 hits, but I don't know, man. That just that kind of signals to me like I don't want anything to do with Demario Davis and IDP. I mean, if you're having to roll this guy out, you're in a bad spot already early in the season, because especially in tackle-heavy leagues, that guy's a no-go, man. I mean, you're hoping for maybe big plays or a few tackles to be funneled his way and he doesn't mess up. But Pete Werner is like a fine. I feel like he's a nice like LB2, 3 option. I don't want him as my LB1. Carl Granderson has been quietly pretty good so far this season. The safeties, that's been a bit of a disappointment there. Not a lot to write home about. But yeah, it's so odd because this Saints defense is arguably top 2, top 3 defense in the NFL right now, and not producing a lot of IDP relevant players. It's always kind of fascinating when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think the corners are probably like the most interesting from both sides, really, because we know what the Tampa Bay defensive line is as well. We know what the Tampa Bay linebackers are, but the corners in this game, I mean, so Jamel Dean for Tampa Bay is likely out of this game. Carl Davis is banged up. I think we could end up with Christian Izien and Zion McCullum this week. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. But I think the Saints corners may be more interesting. We got Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore again, which we love to see. Alontae Taylor, though, this guy, he played 68% of snaps in week 1, 98% in week 2, and then 100% in week 3. So he is a great IDP option to trust and plug into lineups right now, playing that slot role. He's been super productive each week that his snaps have increased. His efficiency or his production has almost doubled each week. So he's just been an excellent player to target for those that are playing in CB required leagues. Alontae Taylor should not be on waiver wires anymore.
Yeah, Adam will wring my neck if he hears that I talked up the Saints and did not mention Alontae Taylor. That is his highest rostered DB and all the best ball tournaments that we did. So that he was on to something. And Alontae Taylor has been awesome. I think he's a must start in CB required leagues.
Yeah, he's been so good. All right, there's not too much more with the Saints and the Buccaneers that people need to know about. We pretty much have a good handle on who they are. So let's go on to the Los Angeles Rams at your Indianapolis Colts. Where do you want to start with this one?
So let's start in a place where I didn't think we were going to start this conversation, the Rams D-line. Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald, but let's talk about Byron Young. This was a guy we said was going to potentially be getting an opportunity because it's Michael Hoyt, and Zach Van Falkenburg, which is another amazing superhero alter ego, and very much a real person. But Byron Young we were interested in just because draft capital was pretty good for the Rams. You have to use a sliding scale for grading their draft capital because they never have any first-round picks. Right. And he's a size speed freak. So Byron Young checked a lot of boxes: opportunity, athleticism, draft capital, and the early returns have been very promising. He's going about 5 tackles per game, 2 sacks through 3 weeks. He's been double-digit by our scoring every single game. John, let's do a little trade. This was
Yeah.
a trade that got floated on the IDP trade show this week, and it was a really fun one because it's all IDP. So, Dre Greenlaw and Byron Young for Nakobe Dean and Antoine Winfield Jr.
Okay.
That's kind of a fun one right now. I will
Yeah.
give you the context here. Adam and Evan Ringler, who was the guest on that show, both went with the Dean Winfield side. I came down on the Greenlaw Young side. Where do you come down on this one?
So I tend to lean the Greenlaw side as well, and I'll tell you why. So Greenlaw for me, he's still one of the top, I think, dynasty assets for IDP at the linebacker position. There aren't many like that. Nakobe Dean is as well. Don't get me wrong, but Dre Greenlaw is a proven asset. He's still fairly young, one of the best linebackers in the league. We still haven't quite seen it from Dean. Obviously, not being healthy right now doesn't help that. But I think the main thing, I love Antoine Winfield. Don't get me wrong, but look at this year. I mean, look how many safeties you could find off the waiver wire, guys that nobody was talking about that are putting up massive production. Where at the edge position, Byron Young, the opportunities there, this team isn't necessarily going to be able to fill that hole in the next year or so at their edge position. So Byron Young's opportunity there for the Rams is pretty massive. I mean, what was his snap share last week? It was 92%. That is pretty unheard of for an edge defender, unless you're Max Crosby, pretty much, right? So I get that. So Byron Young hasn't necessarily had the best pass rush metrics to start the year. I think he's got like a 67.3 pass rush grade so far, but his production has been entirely volume based, and that is, at least something to kind of fall back on if you're putting him into starting lineups. He's got a sack every week, which has been great, but I think it is worth keeping in mind that those metrics, if they don't come up, it becomes slightly harder to kind of trust him in maybe those big play leagues, right? But I think should still have plenty of tackle production by default, playing 90% of snaps. And then again, like this, he's still a rookie, right? So there's that potential for him to kind of develop and get better with more reps and as time comes. Because I mean, I put out the graphs and stuff in the offseason showing like progression for defensive linemen through their NFL career. In years 1 and 2, they don't typically produce the way that we expect. And then it isn't until years 3 and 4, 5 and 6 that we're really starting to see them hit their peak and hit their stride in the NFL. So yeah, I think it's worth taking a shot at, on a Byron Young right now. I think he's somebody that you can plug into lineups if you need it at the edge position, because those guys are hard to find. Whereas safety, maybe not so much. And then obviously linebacker, you could call it a wash if you like, but I do still like Drake Greenlaw over Nakobe Dean.
Yeah, that's kind of where I came down to is like, I think Greenlaw's a better asset than Nakobe Dean linebacker wise. Love Antoine Winfield, but safety, as we've seen, very replaceable. With Dax Hill and Cam Bynum and other types of dudes popping into the top 10 there. And I originally said on the recap episode we did where we were discussing this trade that Byron Young was the most unproven asset in the trade. I think Nakobe Dean might be the most unproven asset in the trade because we've seen 3 games of production now from Byron Young. And I mean, at most we've seen 1.5, 2 games of Nakobe Dean performing. So yeah, it's a fun trade. I think it's very close, but for me, I want the piece that has the chance to be the most coveted asset in IDP, which in my opinion is a top 25 to 30 edge rusher. And I really do think Byron Young has that upside. So yeah, that was just a fun trade. I love what Byron Young has been doing. Where do you have him ranked this week? I'm curious kind of where you're coming down on him.
So I believe I still have him in the edge 3 range. I don't have the exact number pulled up here. So he's in that kind of volume based production. I know he like, as far as like where he's scoring right now, he's like top 10 or something like that as far as scoring, right? But I'm not putting him inside the top 10 just because we know there are so many other like guys that can have like those 3 sack games, right? That have the pass rush metrics and the volume behind them, where Young right now, it's just the volume. So he's still a startable player for me, in maybe a defensive flex spot or something like that. But there are still a fair amount of edges that I prefer going forward, because as much as the first 3 games have been good, is still kind of unproven in a way, right? So it's still very early in the season. So
yeah. Very much a dynasty riser. Don't know how much I trust him for kind of redraft every week start kind of options, but depending on your team's makeup, how many starter positions you have to fill, this guy could definitely be in play. If you're in one of those start 4 DL type of leagues, he's probably cracking your lineup. And
Oh
I'd
yeah.
say, at least so far, you felt pretty good about it. So that's on the Rams side of things. On the Colts side, this is my favorite team. I've got a lot of thoughts and opinions on this team so far. Sitting atop the AFC South, who would have guessed, especially with Gardner Minshew starting week 3. What a game that was.
Amazing game.
But let's talk about the IDP asset that I think we had the most questions about from the Indianapolis Colts this offseason. That is Shaq Leonard.
Yeah.
Zaire Franklin, clearly the LB that you want. We missed on Zaire this offseason. We wondered if Shaq is back. What does that split look like? We'd only seen it 1 year from Zaire. What if he reverted back? Is this just a flash in the pan? Zaire Franklin is awesome. That dude is the heart and soul of that Indianapolis defense. He's a playmaker. He brings the juice. He's got the captain's patch, which Adam always likes to bring up as a huge plus. We need a captain patch in every ranking, like checkbox, just to see, is this guy a captain? Because it matters, John.
Yeah.
It matters. And so he's the guy you want. He's currently on pace for, I'm checking my notes here, 255 tackles this season. So not bad for Zaire Franklin. Shaq is getting more snaps at 75% than EJ Speed, who's playing 49% of snaps. But here's where I think we might differ, John, is that I think the belief around this table too on our show is that EJ Speed is going to eventually supplant Shaq Leonard altogether. Speed is on the field for the most important plays of the game, third down. And if you watch the games, man, he just has so much more juice than Shaq Leonard, whose athleticism, unfortunately, at this point in his career, due to injuries, is just gone. You're not starting EJ Speed, but I'm stashing Speed because of what might be coming down the road. And that's not just that he outplays Shaq Leonard and takes over his starting job, but that he's an injury replacement for Shaq Leonard, right? I bristle at when people say that injury prone is not a thing. I think for the most part that label gets misapplied. But in my opinion, there are certain players, Jamal Adams, Joey Bosa, Shaq Leonard, that have repeated injury histories that are varied, right? With Shaq Leonard, it's been the leg injuries, the nerve not firing in the calf and the back injuries and the broken noses and the concussions. And it's like, if this guy can make it through an entire season, it'll be a miracle. So EJ Speed has inherent value just as an injury replacement. But after watching this guy this season, John, I think he's a better linebacker than Shaq Leonard is right now.
Yeah. It's pretty clear that, Leonard isn't his old self, right, and isn't fully healthy. As far as taking him over by I don't know. I feel like the team is almost like they're stuck with him kind of thing. Like they have to put him out there, right, Shaq Leonard, and play him over in EJ Speed. It just because they've paid him already too. I think at least the way that I'm looking at it right now, we talked about this with Joey as well. I don't know that it's necessarily like a full takeover of Leonard's snaps at least at this point, more of the shift in roles, right? Which we're seeing more across the league. And it's not something that's super common, but it isn't out of the ordinary either, right? So Leonard isn't playing on those third down snaps, potentially because he doesn't have the coverage ability anymore. He doesn't have that movement that they need to play him on passing downs, but he is still being trusted in those early downs, right? Defending the run and having that experience and feel for defending the run and playing gaps properly and things like that, where Speed, not an overly experienced linebacker in the NFL. So we do know that teams tend to trust experience more than anything. So hopefully Leonard feels better as the season goes. Like we just talked about it, it's harder to get healthier as the season goes on, right? But it's an interesting one to kind of track throughout the year because there's potential for it to go both ways. I tend to lean that this is just kind of the new norm for how the Colts are going to deploy their linebackers, with EJ Speed playing those passing down snaps and Leonard playing early down. But I mean, I'm not ruling out that Speed is going to take him over at some point.
The thing to keep in mind, new coaching staff, Shane
Mhm.
Steichen did not draft Shaq Leonard. He did not pay Shaq Leonard. Now, Gus Bradley is still there, he's been the defensive coordinator now, I think, for 3 years in Indy. So there is a little bit of continuity, but keep in mind that this coaching staff did go out and re-sign EJ Speed. So they made a financial investment to bring this guy back, whereas they have no ties to Shaq Leonard. And I think
Mhm.
he will be cut this next offseason when the dead cap drops below his actual cap hit. So it's
Yeah.
always just, we'll talk about the Texans here in a little bit. And it's like it's always interesting to me the existing assets on a team that a coach or a regime did not personally bring in. You just got to be careful because the rug can be pulled out from those guys at any point. The guy I was expecting the rug to be pulled out from under is another guy I want to bring up here, Julian Blackmon. We heard all offseason, John, right? This guy's going to be the box
Right,
safety,
right.
right? It's like this is the role that we're kind of slotting him into. We've never seen him do it. He's traditionally
Mhm.
been a deep safety, right? But Gus Bradley's defense, the box safety role, very profitable for IDP. So we paid attention. And I mean, thus far, the usage has been outstanding. 74% of his snaps in the sweet spot, 9 tackles per game. That's 153 tackle pace for the season. He's played 100% of snaps so far. Everything that we have wanted for Julian Blackmon has come to fruition. I think he's locked in as like a high-end safety 2 option for you. I don't know kind of where you're ranking him each week, John, but that feels like he's cracking the lineup in most leagues.
Yeah, no, he is for sure. I have him as safety 9 this week. I just love the utilization there. 46% in the box so far this year. And yeah, like you said, it's allowed him to be one of the most efficient tacklers at the position, despite never having that history there, right? So he's now played more box snaps in 3 games this year than he has in any one of his previous 3 seasons as a starter in the NFL. So I think that's a pretty important transition there, especially for a guy that was never really IDP relevant, and now he is putting up such strong tackle numbers. That just shows you kind of the importance of deployment for our IDP safeties, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Being closer to the ball makes you more apt to make plays. Who would have thought? Um,
Amazing.
one final group I want to talk about from this Colts team. Give me some grace here, listeners. This is my favorite squad, and it's an exciting defense.
Yeah.
In fact, I would argue that our defense is what has gotten us 2 wins thus far in the 2023 season. And let's talk about probably, likely the best unit on this team, which is the defensive line, tied for second in the league right now in total team sacks. Not since the days of Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, John, have the Colts had a fearsome pass rush. But we have the makings of one now. DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Dio Odangbo. They've been making the QB's lives miserable. But the highlight for me, it's Kwity Paye.
Yeah.
He's finally putting it together in his 3rd season after being drafted in the 1st round. He has 1 sack in each game and weirdly 1 fumble recovery in 2 games. I found that kind of interesting stat quirk. His pressure rate is 10.1, so it's fine. Averaging 4 tackles per game. I don't really see Paye as like entrenched in like the edge 1, like top 12 conversation, but he's firmly in that edge 2 territory for me. And that speaks more towards how deep and rich the edge position has been to start the season. But we waited and waited for Kwity Paye to put it together. My man, I think, is finally coming into his own.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And this was one of my breakout candidates coming into the year. And it's because, right, we do have to kind of be patient with these guys that are like these athletic freaks that have the physical tools, but aren't necessarily the most refined pass rushers. It takes time. So coming into year 3 here, really nice to see for Kwity Paye. I have him in that edge 2 range as well for rankings wise. But yeah, the Colts D line, it definitely a hot start. Tied for the 2nd most sacks in the league, 3rd highest pressure to sack conversion rate just for their defensive line alone. And I don't like to rain on the parade, but I do think that the other shoe could drop at some point because they are 28th in pressure rate so far this year at 29.7%. But this is a great matchup this week, at least against the Rams, right? The 3rd lowest pass blocking grade in the league for their offensive line at 37.8. So still like that Colts Colts offensive line quite a bit this week. But yeah, something to kind of keep in mind. I think that there could be some regression there as the weeks go on, but they've been excellent so far this year.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go on to the Minnesota Vikings at the Carolina Panthers. Let's do our quick weekly Ivan Pace update here. So Ivan Pace, the linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings, undrafted free agent, did have his lowest snap share of the year, 62% last week. I don't think it's all that concerning, though. We know he is just the LB2 there, and Brian Flores is really only going to rely on one linebacker as a full-time player. So really, we're just kind of biding our time here until Jordan Hicks gets hurt. No, just kidding. But look, Ivan Pace has been excellent, 84.9 defensive grade on the year, fourth among all linebackers, but not somebody that you technically want to start in your lineups for most leagues just yet, but just nice to see. And I like to give the Ivan Pace update. Other than that, the Vikings defensive line versus the Carolina offensive line, I think should be the story here. No team has allowed more total pressures this season than the Carolina Panthers, who have allowed 65 on the year. They've also allowed the second highest pressure rate at 44.8%. Danielle Hunter hasn't necessarily torn it up as far as pass rush metrics go, but he's playing a ton, over 90%, I believe. And now he has 5 sacks in 3 games. He's still a top 5 edge option this week against the Panthers. It would also be a really nice time for Marcus Davenport to come back and have a nice game. I'm just saying, but we'll see if that actually happens or not.
You are clinging on to that Marcus Davenport life raft as the giant gash in the side slowly deflates the raft into the water and the sharks start circling. But yeah, Danielle Hunter, man, he is going to break Bryce Young over his knee like a little baby. Or if it's Andy Dalton, doesn't matter. Still going to lift him up and break him over his knee like a tiny baby because Danielle Hunter looks like an action figure. And he has been tremendous this season. Yeah. And especially with that woeful Carolina offensive line, I think he's got to be in consideration for like edge 1 this week because he's proven it. He's got the volume, and maybe those pass rush metrics get right against this horrid offensive line. Yeah. I'm curious, John, what do you think is going on with the Panthers linebackers? This kind of seems like a mess now. Shaq Thompson out for the year. Yeah. Frankie Louvu out for, do we know how long Frankie's out?
Well, it sounds like he won't miss time with the hip injury. It sounds like they didn't think it was that serious. At least the latest update that I saw today, it said something about him they're not concerned about him missing time, that this hip injury isn't that serious. So even though he left the game, I think around the end of the first half or so last week, it doesn't seem like he's actually going to miss this game. But we'll see. That could just be coach speak or whatever. But I think that's one to kind of worth kind of keeping an eye on. But if he does, even if he doesn't, because like you said, Shaq Thompson's out. So Camu Grugier-Hill played 100% of snaps when Frankie Louvu was out of the game in the second half, for what it's worth. Deion Jones also mixed in there a fair bit. So another situation to monitor there. I'm leaning Camu Grugier-Hill being the LB2 here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him and Jones kind of split up those vacant Shaq Thompson snaps this week potentially. But I do think that if Frankie Louvu plays, I would lean Camu Grugier-Hill. If Frankie Louvu doesn't play, I think both of those guys can have some value.
Yeah, seems like Grugier-Hill is the guy that you want regardless in both scenarios. I hope Frankie plays. He's such a fun player to watch, good. Man. He's such a stud. For me, really, it's Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu on this team. I mean, maybe Derek Brown if you're in D-tackle required leagues. And maybe Jeremy Chin. John, are we going back down the Jeremy Chin road now with the Xavier Woods injury?
I don't think I am. I feel like maybe he'll get more playing time. Xavier Woods is expected to miss time. Chin did play more than usual this past week, but it was Sam Franklin who came in and absorbed the vacant Woods snaps, playing mostly deep safety. So I'm not as interested in Sam Franklin just because it's more of a deep safety role. So I am more interested to just kind of see if that was game plan specific for Jeremy Chin playing 77% of snaps, or if he's going to be moving back to the safety role there in Carolina. So Not trusting any of these guys other than Von Bell this week, because I do want to see how it plays out. But I don't know, man. Jeremy Chin is super disappointing. The way they've deployed him this year has been basically made him droppable in almost any kind of league format. So we'll see if he has value this week as maybe a potential waiver wire claim for the week after, or this week if you're desperate and need the start. But not as excited for him.
Yeah, I skip it. That team, if Frankie's out, it's Brian Burns or bust for me. I'm not, and it's always context specific, right? You may not have any better options than Kamu Grugier-Hill or Deion Jones or Jeremy Chin, but hopefully you do, because these are not fun options. Like, it's hold your nose and start them sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd have to like permanently lose your sense of smell to deal with the stink of putting those guys in your lineup. So let's move on to the next game, because this one makes me a little sad.
All right, fair enough. Let's go on to a game that hopefully won't make anybody sad. This should be a very fun one. The Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills. Josh, I'll let you kick us off wherever you want to start with one of these teams.
Man, talking about making me sad, Jalen Phillips picked up an oblique injury. John, we had to look up what the oblique was. I don't think, as like mid-30s washed dads, that we have obliques. I think we have love handles where our obliques should be. But Jalen Phillips dealing with a second injury this season. It's a bummer. I think old Rip Van Winkle, Andrew Van Ginkel, has put some kind of curse on Jalen Phillips. And although his initials do spell AVG, average, Van Ginkel, he's been pretty solid I got to give the guys props. He's been pretty solid the last 2 weeks, averaging 19.33 points in our scoring system. I don't want anything to do with him, because I don't want to dishonor Jalen like that, but I think you could do worse than Rip Van Winkle this week.
Yeah, I think if Jalen Phillips is going to miss time, Van Ginkel could potentially be worth a shot here. There should be plenty of opportunity to rush the passer. This should be a pass-heavy game between both sides. So, yeah, not as excited about him as I would be if Jalen Phillips was in there. We'll see how it goes this week. I don't know what an oblique is, so hopefully whatever that is heals quickly for him. But yeah, it's a weird situation there for Miami, because if Phillips is out, we talked about this last week too. If Phillips is out, Van Ginkel plays his edge spot, which means that David Long plays a little bit more off-ball linebacker. But if Phillips is in, Van Ginkel plays a little bit more off-ball linebacker, and David Long kind of disappears into the darkness. Yeah, I don't know.
It's like a Rube Goldberg machine here. If Jalen Phillips is out, then Van Ginkel's here, and there's David Long. But if he's in, then David Long goes back into his hole. I don't like that, Vic Fangio. We're going to talk about a player whose usage, I like what you're doing with this guy. Don't like what you're doing with David Long, a player that the Dolphins brought in free agency. Get better soon, Jalen Phillips. Unfortunately, with how muscular and large your body is, that's a lot of oblique to heal. Yeah. So hopefully it heals quickly for your sake and for our sake, because I think the breakout is still on track. Oh, yeah. Getting a little nervous with these injuries, though. So get better soon. If I had an oblique, I would mail it to you, Jalen. But I don't think that arrangement is going to work. So let's talk about Javon Holland, though, John. I've long been a Javon Holland stan, much like Kwity Paye. The other guy that's close to my heart and close to my roster in our main league, we're finally seeing it come together for Javon Holland. His problem was never talent, John. It was just usage. Yeah. But so far this season, Holland is logging 52.7% of his snaps in the sweet spot. That's DL, box, and slot. His career sweet spot usage was 28%, so he's almost doubled that this season. I said it on our recap show this week. It's very clear to me Vic Fangio loves having a guy like Javon Holland in his arsenal. So question for you, John. Does Mr. Holland's opus continue to get such primo usage moving forward?
I think it does. I
I
feel
think so
pretty good
too.
about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel good about the way that they've deployed him. I think he's been effective for them. I think they're going to like to see that is working out on their behalf. I don't think there's any reason for them to go to Brandon Jones or to switch him with Deshaun Elliott or anybody like that. I think Javon Holland is their star there at the safety position. So, you get him on the field, you put him amongst the action as much as he can be involved and let him do his thing. And that's what we've been getting. And that's why he's safety one on the year so far this season. So yeah, I love the matchup again for him this week. 36% in the box on the year around there. That's been great. Super efficient as a tackler so far as well, which has obviously been huge. And thank you to that deployment for that happening. But yeah, this should be another great matchup for safeties and DBs here in this game on both sides. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Get on
excited
board.
about Javon Holland.
Get on board the Javon Holland train, man. He's so fun. Isn't it fun, John, to play IDP and have guys on your team that just make plays and are fun to watch? That makes fantasy football more fun, and Javon Holland has been atop that list for me this season.
Definitely. Yeah, he's been awesome. Another guy that's been pretty fun on the Bills side, at least last week he was, Terrell Bernard, who is being their LB2 right now, next to Matt Milano. LB2, you could call them whatever you want. They both played the same amount of snaps. So he's really been their LB1 just but production wise. But Terrell Bernard, 2 sacks, an interception last week. That boosted him way up the IDP leader scoring boards. I love seeing that as much as the next guy for sure. I think it is important and that we don't necessarily chase that production the following week, especially maybe in a game like this where he might not have those kind of opportunities. Right, Tua Tagovailoa has been one of the best quarterbacks so far this year as far as turnover-worthy play rates go. Miami has also done a really great job of keeping Tua from getting hit or sacked this year. He has the second best knockdown rate in the league on the season. That kind of takes away a lot of that potential that we saw last week for Bernard, but still a full-time player, which makes him startable in most leagues. And really that's what we're hoping for. Everything else on top of that is just a bonus.
Yeah, we were worried about Terrell Bernard this offseason, especially when it was Tyrell Dodson season, Dorian Williams season, AJ freaking Klein season there for a hot minute. And so one of the more savage kind of last minute twists. Oh, it's actually Terrell Bernard. He's going to be the LB2. That nugget dropped about 2 days before the season started, I feel like.
Yeah.
So good on Sean McDermott for keeping that under wraps like a Marvel cameo. But we kind of worried, even with Bernard getting the nod, what if this guy doesn't play well? The rug could get pulled out from under this guy. They could go with Dodson or Klein or Dorian or bring in someone off the street for that matter. But man, he has been playing well. 24 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2 INTs, a fumble recovery, 91% of snaps. My only real issue is something that Adam brought up this week that I wasn't aware of. The total snap volume is so low just because this guy plays in Buffalo. He is averaging 45 snaps per game. Zaire Franklin is averaging 75.3 snaps per game. That's 30 snaps more per game than Terrell Bernard. Yeah. I have full faith firing this guy up unless you have one of those higher volume producers ahead of him, like a CJ Mosley, like a Zaire Franklin. We're still early enough in the season that I'm going to lean on the volume when making those start-sit decisions between several good options. I'm going to lean on the guys that are getting more opportunities on the field.
Yeah, and typically like the defensive snaps played, it tends to kind of even out throughout the year, right? Right now it's been very low for Buffalo, but I don't think that'll be the case this week against Miami, and we'll see that kind of level out throughout the rest of the season. So I don't think you have to worry about it too much for Bernard, but it could potentially be in those games where they are heavily favored or something like that, because Bills haven't been afraid to sit these guys too and rest them when they're up comfortably, right? So that would be the one thing to kind of consider there. Anything else from this game, or you want to move to Denver, Chicago?
Let's go Denver, Chicago.
All right, let's do it. Let's go. Denver Broncos at the Chicago Bears is the next one. So the top storyline here, probably Josie Jewell's groin. Doesn't seem like he's fully healthy right now. And that could be a problem because we could get well, not that it's a problem because we like Alex Kingleton, but Alex Kingleton could be getting a full-time role. He is typically pretty efficient when he's on the field, so I think there's potential for him to kind of get back into that top 12 range of linebacker, but he needs to be playing every down snaps because this defense isn't as tackle friendly as it was last year. So that would be the one thing to kind of keep in mind there. I also don't have a lot of confidence that the Bears offense will even be on the field that much for that opportunity, but that's kind of a whole other story. If Josie Jewell does miss time, the rookie Drew Sanders may take on Alex Singleton's more rotational role in the defense, so giving him some opportunity for dynasty managers that spent rookie picks on him or that are in deeper leagues, adding him from the waiver wire. Any interest in Drew Sanders? This Broncos defense has been an absolute nightmare. They lead the league in missed tackles with 43, so they're struggling out there. What do you think Drew Sanders can help?
Yes, I think he can help, but only so much. I cannot get the image out of my mind of like 8 Denver Broncos laid out on the ground in that Miami game, like a grenade had gone off and they were all ducking for cover. I don't know how good this defense is. I think we could see it's Vance Joseph, right? Is the defensive coordinator there? Yeah. I think we could see him getting the boot here in the next week or two if things don't turn around. And man, outside of Kingleton, there's not a lot of players on this defense that I'm really firing up with confidence. Zach Allen, sure. It's, it's like mild interest depending on your league depth. Randy Gregory might be one of the most frustrating edge rushers in the league. Obviously I have a little bit of interest in Jewell if he's healthy. Drew Sanders, I'm excited to see what he can do. Am I putting a guy into the lineup week 1 if he is inheriting a larger role? Probably not. I'd like to be in a situation where I don't have to do that, but I am excited. I think this will probably be alongside Jack Campbell, one of the rookie debuts, right? I mean, how many rookie LBs are getting a ton of run right now?
Not much.
Not a lot. Dayon Henley can't get on the field. Dorian Williams can't get on the field. So I'm excited to see what Drew Sanders can do, but man, this is the matchup of the two teams that got their pants pulled down on the playground last week. I mean, the Chicago Bears got embarrassed in front of Taylor Swift. Yeah, I don't know, man. Both these teams just kind of have a stink on them right now. Kingleton, fire him up, especially if he's getting full-time work. He could have 25 tackles in a game with 100% of snaps. But outside that, man, this Denver defense kind of stinks for IDP.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I wouldn't want to spend much more time on Denver talking about them here. So let's go to the Chicago team. And again, kind of the same thing here with Chicago. Their defensive line is god-awful. There's nobody there of interest, even Yannick Ngakoue. Corner, Kyler Gordon's hurt. The rest of them are kind of banged up as well, so that's a bummer. Jaquan Brisker banged up as well, so he's interesting at safety, but really it's the linebackers, I think, for Chicago. TJ Edwards has been awesome. It's a great defense for tackle production. He's definitely delivered. Tremaine Edmonds did leave last game. That's the only note I have, really, but he figures to be fine. He played 73% last week. But it seems like it's nothing serious. But if it is, Jack Sanborn would be the next man up. So, okay. Anything else for Chicago?
This team stinks, John. Yeah, they're a dumpster fire of epic proportions. The LBs are fine. You've got some decent safety options there, and Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker. And Kyler Gordon, when he comes back, should be fine. Mm-hmm. But man, these teams just make me very sad. I think let's move on to the next game because not a lot to get excited about here.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's do a quick ad from our friends at DraftKings first. We are back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers with every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner, and DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the app now and sign up with code PFF. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. With code PFF, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. Licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles, Louisiana. 21 plus age, varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. All right.
John, that was an auctioneer-like performance, and we are getting the DraftKings in Kentucky starting tomorrow.
Hey, all right,
so
let's go.
Yeah,
hey, plus 7,500. Rashawn Gary, comeback player of the year. $5 pays like 400 or something. So there you go.
You know I love it. I'm going to be laying the wood on that. The whole college tuition for the kiddos going on Rashawn Gary's comeback player of the year chances.
Let's go. All right, let's go on to the Washington Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles. Josh, where do you want to start with this game?
So let's kick things off with the Washington linebackers, and we'll get to the better unit here in just a second, which is the defensive line. 100% of snaps for Cody Starton Barton, 68% for I Can't Drive 65 Jamin Davis. John, I want to start a team with Cody Barton, Alex Anzalone, and Big Bob Robert Spillane that gets absolutely blown away on the NFL field, but absolutely eats for IDP. Nothing but 3 linebacker sets and drip for this trio. I kind of lump all these guys in together. I can't imagine why. I'm not a Barton guy. I know there are folks that are a fan of this dude because he's always underrated, disrespected. He always goes in and performs. I just think the dude kind of stinks. And he's just pure volume and tackles, man. That's all it is. 100% of snaps, just purely a tackle machine. I want more from my linebackers personally, but if you're in a tackle-heavy league, he's a fine option. I like Jamin Davis in big play leagues, but not at that snap percentage. I want to see him tick up a little bit. I was with you that I thought Jamin was going to be the guy. I don't know if the off-field stuff kind of cost him that opportunity or what happens, but I've been very disappointed that they haven't given Davis more run in now, his 3rd season?
Yeah, 3rd season. I'm super disappointed. I thought he played really well last year when he filled in for Cole Holcomb as a full-time player. I thought that was a really strong indication that they trusted him and they were going to trust him for this year, especially when you consider that the only player they brought in was Cody Barton, who you don't think would necessarily be a threat to start and play that 100% role. But here we are. He is the clear LB1 option there, Cody Barton. So we like that for IDP because these guys don't cost much and we could plug them into lineups and they could hopefully be productive. But man, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but these 1st-round picks on linebackers, we probably got to stop doing it, right? For NFL teams, they just have not been worth it. And like we've had Micah Parsons, he doesn't really count because he's an edge and was kind of a hybrid player coming out anyways, but Quay Walker might be the only one that's kind of working out so far. And it's still super early there, but otherwise, like the last 3 or 4 years, it's Devin Lloyd, Zaven Collins, Jamin Davis, Isaiah Simmons, Kenneth Murray, Jordan Brooks, Patrick Queen, Devin White, Devin Bush. These guys all kind of stink. They all have a potential to not get their 5th-year option picked up or extended. So why spend the 1st-round pick on it? That's a big list of players that just aren't worth the 1st-round talent. So I don't know. That's my rant about spending 1st-round picks on linebackers. Hopefully Jack Campbell is not next. Hopefully he becomes one of the outliers there. But man, not a great hit rate so far for the NFL.
Not great. Not worth the pick. But hey, for IDP, 1st-round draft capital does make us feel better that this guy is going to get an opportunity. Now, is he worth the crap? That remains to be seen. Does he get that 2nd contract with his team? Probably not. But all the guys that you mentioned have had moments, some fewer than others, but for IDP. But I agree with you in terms of real NFL. I don't know why these teams continue to spend 1st-round picks on a position they can get to hit much later in the draft. Let's talk about a position that you want to draft early and often in the actual NFL draft, and that's defensive line. Washington's defensive line. What about Deron Payne? John, it's good to see him playing well. He had an outstanding 2022. He's currently D-tackle 2 by our scoring. He scored double digits every week, playing 79% of snaps. He's getting enough volume for me, John, to be in that category of set it and forget it D-tackles if you're in a D-tackle required league. What do you think about Deron Payne so far this season?
Yeah, I'm with you. Him, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, even Chase Young now. It's nice to see Chase Young back. These guys, I think, all have the potential to be locked into lineups pretty much every week. And look, the volume is going to be there. We know that they have the potential to put up strong pass rush metrics and pressure numbers, sack rates as well. So that's what you really want, and these guys will kind of be able to help each other as well. By them collapsing the pocket and creating chaos in the backfield, it creates opportunities for the other ones to kind of get in and clean up on the sacks as well. So that it's just a nice defensive line for IDP there, with all of these guys. And like I said, nice to have Chase Young back healthy as well. Though I will say the Eagles' offensive line, Jalen Hurts, they've been a tougher matchup. Jalen Hurts has the second lowest knockdown rate in the league, tied with Miami at 3.7%. And this Eagles O-line has been pretty solid still, even though they haven't been as good as last season. So it could still create a tougher matchup here for this Washington D line. But this is a group that is talented enough to kind of overcome that.
Yeah, and the Vikings did give the Eagles fits on Thursday Night Football. Danielle Hunter was wrecking shop, so I think that we could see. I wouldn't bet on it, but it's in the range of outcomes that we could have a big blow up game from like a Montez Sweat,
Sure.
who's I think a really solid option. You're looking at 76% of snaps, a little bit quiet in week 3. I still think he's a top option at edge. Jonathan Allen started week 1 well. He's been quiet the last 2 weeks, but he's playing 87% of snaps, so that's great. I'm still firing up Jonathan Allen. I think he's one of the better D tackles in the league. I have confidence in him long term. You mentioned Chase Young, John. He's back. He's played 75.3% of snaps the last 2 weeks. He has a sack and a half, 6 tackles. What do we think about this guy rest of season? I see him as kind of like an edge 3 option, just because, again, the position is so flush with talent. And, what we've seen from Chase Young when he's been healthy has been up and down, but the early signs have been promising this season.
Yeah, I think so. I think he looks a lot better. I think he's already through the few games that we've seen him so far this year. I think that's been a positive sign. Just kind of watching him on the field, seeing that kind of explosiveness and that dominance at the snap has been a positive sign for me. There's going to be games where he's quiet for sure, but I like him as like a low end edge too, like around that 24 range, 20 to 24 range fairly regularly. I think there's that potential there. And if he starts to string together some games with strong pass rush metrics, I think that just kind of pushes him further up the ranks as well. And as we continue to see him get healthy. So yeah, I have faith that he'll be able to have a strong year and hopefully get an extension there in Washington, stay there, or whatever ends up happening with him. But yeah, not ready to rule out Chase Young yet. I think he still has that potential that we were kind of hoping for from him.
Yeah, we all want to see Chase Young do well. I do think he's out next offseason. I think they're going to prioritize re-signing Montez Sweat. That's my prediction. We'll see how it goes. Let's look at the other team, though, John, and talk about the Eagles linebackers. There are certain teams at this point in the season, groups that are just total stayaways for me. The Eagles linebackers, I'm just not interested, man. Nicholas Morrow, Zach Cunningham, Christian Ellis, you can just keep all that. No, thank you. I know there's value here, and I admire guys like you trying to sift through the turds to find the diamonds, but I would rather just look elsewhere. I'm not really excited about anyone in this group.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know, it may not seem like Nicholas Morrow is playing a full-time role just looking at his box score, but he is that 95% in week 2, 100% in week 3, but the man has just 5 tackles in 2 games, which is a 4.9% tackle efficiency. That is absolute dog water. But look, the snaps are there. We'll see if he turns it around at some point. But man, yeah, that's all we're really banking on here is the snaps. Cunningham, I think, could be fine if he gets back up to that 85 to 90% roll. He was below 80% this past week. Hopefully, Nakobe Dean hurries back and we could get him kind of saving this linebacker group here because there's potential there for a full-time player to be useful for IDP, but Nicholas Morrow has not been that so far.
Yeah, I think these guys could play 200% of snaps and would still probably only produce about 5 or 6 tackles. These dudes stink.
Yeah.
A guy who has not stunk, though, John, through the first 3 weeks is Reed Blankenship.
Yeah.
In the 2 games he's played, he's essentially seen 100% of the snaps. He's averaging 9 tackles per game. He has an INT. Let me ask you this. Is there a reason not to trust this guy? He seems like one of the sneakiest, like elite safety starts out there. I mean, he's averaging, by our scoring, 21 points per game. That's 5th among all DBs. Is there a reason not to like Reed Blankenship?
I kind of love Reed Blankenship. I
Right? I don't
think,
know why
yeah.
you wouldn't at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a kind of a soft spot for like these UDFA players, but look, 2022 UDFA out of Middle Tennessee, nobody's heard of him, but he played really well last year when they needed him. He posted a 78.9 overall grade last year through the playoffs as well. This year, an 83.0 overall grade, and like you said, he's been a decent IDP. So look, I know the NFL wants to look to replace these UDFA guys all the time, but I'm kind of all aboard the Blankenship to the moon here. He has been great.
Yeah, I had high hopes for Sidney Brown, and I still do think he's the future of the
Yeah.
safety position there in Philly. But for this year, all aboard the Reed Blankenship train, the Reed Blankenship ship. Let's fly.
Yep. Blankenship, baby. Anything else for this game? Eagles, Washington.
Let's talk Ravens Browns, baby.
Let's do it. All right. So let us start with, I mean, where else? Where else are we going to start? With Kyle Hamilton. He is him. He proved it this past week. The man, I mean, oh my God, he was a monster this past week. 3 sacks. Everyone was kind of ready to write him off. After 2 weeks, he was dropped in a ton of leagues. I know this because I got a lot of messages saying that they dropped him. But even in dynasty leagues, he was dropped. I picked him up immediately before last week's game because somebody dropped him in a dynasty league. So look, if you trusted the process, you likely won your week with 3 sacks. I left him inside the top 10 rankings last week, and he delivered. He did see a significant shift in his usage, moving to a primary slot role, which definitely keeps him more involved in the action. He was just playing way too many deep snaps the first 2 weeks to be overly effective. I think Marcus Williams should be back as well to play more of those deep snaps, but they're also without a nickel corner with Ardarius Washington landing on IR. So I think this role will stick here for Hamilton. I just don't expect 3 sacks every week, but as long as that usage remains, then he'll remain among my top 10 safeties.
Yeah, and it's like we've seen this slot role be so profitable for IDP, John, whether it's Brian Branch, who we talked about briefly, whether it's, L'Jarius Sneed or Trent McDuffie, whether it's, any number of guys. Kenny Moore, a few seasons ago had that slot role. And these guys, when they get that role, are good not just in like CB required leagues, but DB leagues. I mean, if you're playing on sleeper, those slot cornerbacks are a lot of times some of your best starts because it raises the tackle floor. It gives them that opportunity to, have those blitz opportunities like we saw. I mean, I don't think the opposing teams are going to give him like 3 clean looks at the quarterback. And, Adam kind of speculated maybe Gardner Minshew took some gummies before this game and was not maybe in his right sober mind. But hey, look, this is what we knew was possible with Kyle Hamilton. All the stars aligned for this guy this season. He had the opportunity. We expected good alignment. He's an athletic freak. The draft capital was there. This was the culmination of everything that we had been waiting for. I planted a flag on Kyle Hamilton as a top 3 safety this season. I feel really good about that. Of course, he's not going to put up this kind of stat line every game. I mean, come on, let's not be dopes here. But there are a few safeties in IDP I'm as excited about now than Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, this was the kind of potential we were looking for, right? We knew that he was going to be a good, effective blitzer if they utilized him that way. We know he could be an effective tackler if they put him in that situation. So it's just a matter of them deploying him correctly, and then he's going to be an IDP star. Anything else for the Ravens that's worth touching on?
No, I mean, you know what you got there. Roquan
Yeah.
Smith is great. Patrick Queen has been surprisingly pretty good.
Yeah.
I think he's a fine start. Um, Defensive line has just kind of been meh, not a lot going on there. So, yeah, I think we can move on to the Browns.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the Ravens defensive line's been super banged up as well. I think OA questionable. Hopefully he'll be back because he was playing actually he was actually been the one that was playing well, at least in the game and a half that we got of him this year. But yeah, Ojabo's questionable. Tyus Bowser's on the non-football injury list. It was like Tavius Robinson, Jadavion Clowney, and Jeremiah Moon as the top edges for Baltimore last week. So not ideal. We can move on from the Baltimore Ravens edges. You're not likely starting any of those guys in most leagues. Let's talk. Yeah, let's talk about the Browns defense because they've been pretty incredible to start the season, and not even like I don't even think like delivering in the box score to their full potential yet either, which is pretty scary, at least as far as sacks go, right? Because the D line has been excellent at creating pressure. They're top 5 in the league there. They've ranked second in quick pressure rate. They have the fastest time to pressure in the league at 2.17 seconds, but they're just 10th in sack conversion rate. So there's potentially room for positive regression there if they continue to play this way, especially considering that Zadarius Smith doesn't even have a sack yet. So if he's going to get going, then they're just going to be all that more dangerous. So, man, the defensive line especially has been super impressive for the Browns.
Yeah, the defense is really good. They're keeping this team in games because Deshaun Watson is doing everything he can to throw the games away and then go on Twitter and fire up his burners to defend himself. Yeah, I love Myles Garrett this season. I mean, he was a top 5 player by our ADP in the best ball drafts that we did for a reason. The dude, I mean, John, I feel like I'm seeing, like, Twitter is showing me more and more pictures of Myles Garrett's biceps, and legitimately, I know they're bigger than my thigh.
Right.
I think it may be bigger than my torso. Like, I
Yeah,
think
there's a
we're
good chance.
getting to the point where he is like reaching Incredible Hulk status at this point. So, he's obviously a must start every week. Zadarius Smith, again, trust the process. This dude is good. I think he's going to have a rebound here at some point. The linebackers, though, John, what a mess. Another one of these groups. It's amazing how many linebacker rooms right now are just like, no thank you, not interested. And Cleveland's right up there, very high on that list, if not like top 2 or 3. Walker's fine, JOK's fine. But I mean, it's just like, no, I don't want to roll out any of these guys.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I think the only positive that's come from this Cleveland linebacker group is that at least we've gotten 2 weeks in a row of Anthony Walker leading the group in snaps. I think that's something, at least as far as a step in the right direction for consistency. If some poor soul does have to rely on a Browns linebacker in their lineup, but I would not be surprised at all if we got like more JOK this week against Lamar. So I'm just continue to be cautious here with this group. The snaps aren't there. Another one of these man heavy defenses. So the tackle efficiency isn't necessarily going to be there either. So it just makes me worried. I think the main player that who's technically kind of playing a lot more linebacker this year, although he is a safety, is Grant Delpit. He's kind of the one that I'm most excited about. 38% in the box, 22% on the D line, and just 16% deep last week. You'd love to see that. And he's been super solid as far as tackle efficiency goes for the safety position. So not interested in the Browns linebackers, but very interested in Grant Delpit.
Myles Garrett, tier break. Grant Delpit, tier break. Zadarius Smith. That's really it for me in terms of the Browns.
Yeah, that's fair. And there's some guys that you could lump in there, like in that next tier, which is probably Obo, Garanquo, maybe JOK or Anthony Walker, Dalvin Tomlinson, maybe in DT required leagues, but has been quiet this year as well. But yeah, we can move on from the Browns. We know they're a very good defense. For IDP, we know who they are as well. So moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Houston Texans. Josh, where do you want to start?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Steelers linebackers. No, thank you. Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts, Quan Alexander. No, thank you. Same thing. I mean, Pittsburgh, we kind of know what they are, right? Because the linebackers, that's a big no. We know Minka Fitzpatrick is a great start. and we know the edge rushers, right? Like
Yeah,
Cam
yeah.
Hayward's out now, which is a massive bummer. But I mean, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, I mean, what else needs to be said about these guys in our scoring system? Watt is the overall leading scorer for all of fantasy football.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
TJ
Same
Watt
here.
has been, yeah, absolutely incredible to start the season. Alex Highsmith is edge 8 for us. Both are elite starts. You're starting them every single week with confidence. The linebackers, you have zero confidence in. Minka Fitzpatrick is a solid start at safety. I think we got the Steelers pretty well figured out, man.
I think so too. Yeah, like the Steelers linebackers. I mean, we saw this last year. I mentioned it as soon as Holcomb signed there that this was not one of my preferred destinations for him because I had a concern that they wouldn't utilize him as a full-time player, even though I think he should be considering their other options. But I did get some pushback for that. I left it alone. But now here we are with that same kind of rotational mess as last season, and we don't get to see that sweet mullet in a full-time role. So now he's like LB 48 for me this week. So but yeah, like you said, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, the Texans are passing a ton as well. So that's just a world that Watt and Highsmith want to live in because these are two of the most opportune pass rushers in the league. They're both top 10 options for me this week as well. Let's go to the Texans then, because Denzel Perryman could return this week, although I just checked he did not practice today. So that is a bit concerning. So I think there are people who are excited about a potential for a rookie to kind of come in here and play, and that is Hanky Two Toes, the rookie linebacker coming in, having a nice game last week. That is Henry To'o for those that don't get it. But I'm going with Hanky Two Toes here as his new nickname. We'll see if that sticks, but really nice game last week, 95% of snaps. No reason he can't have a nice game, even as an LB2 when Perriman comes back, because we know D'Amico Ryans considers Christian Harris as mid now and has already shoved him down the depth chart. But great defense for linebacker tackle efficiency. Definitely some value to be had here with Two Toes on 85% snap share, assuming Perriman is the full-time guy. But if Perriman's out, then it's more wheels up for Two Toes.
Yeah, this has been one of the more interesting stories for me. Two Toes is amazing. It makes me think of 2 Chainz. It makes me think of Kirk Cousins. Right. So one of the more interesting stories, though, for me is this Houston Texans linebacker group. Yeah. We assumed that Denzel Perryman would be one of the 2 starting linebackers. We did not think that he would be the 100% snap linebacker. I think when he is back, he resumes that full-time role. I'm with you that Hanky Two Toes is going to be the LB2 there. And if Perryman is out, he's the LB1. We've seen that. We've also seen that Blake freaking Cashman started ahead of Christian Harris. So the meme of the guy like jumping into the grave and pulling the dirt over himself, that's essentially Christian Harris's IDP outlook right now. And it's just weird, John, that we've arrived in this place. I mean, we talked in the offseason. We liked Henry To'o because of his name. We like to sing it on the pod and have some fun with it. Like, who's the LB2 going to be? Maybe it's Christian Harris. Maybe it's Christian Kirksey. Maybe it's Corey Littleton. And, hey, maybe it's Henry T if the rest of those guys die in a bus crash. But here we are where Hanky Two Toes could be the LB1 in Houston in week 4. So it's just – keep your head on a swivel in a vicious cockfight, as Anchorman like to say. And you got to keep your head on a swivel on IDP too, because things change very quickly.
Yeah. So this is a situation to kind of keep an eye on here, but you do want to go to the waiver wire to add Hanky Two Toes off of there. It kind of, now that I'm saying it, it makes me think of have you seen Goodfellas, right? Frankie 2 times. I'm gonna go get the papers. He always said everything twice, but I think that's might be subliminally where that came from for me.
I bet there's a good overlap between that movie and your listeners. So I bet a lot of people got that ref.
Everybody knows Goodfellas.
Everybody knows Goodfellas, right?
Yeah, they have to. All right. Anything else here for the Texans that you want to touch on? Yeah,
I mean, Will Anderson, I like what I've seen so far. 69% of snaps, 13.6% pressure rate, 4.3 tackles per game. That's a 73% tackle rate. imagine what happens when he gets home on a few more sacks. I don't think he's in must-start territory by any means. He's on that fringe, like edge 2-3 option, but early returns very, very promising for Will Anderson.
Yeah, nice to see him kind of getting out there. He's had a big game already, and then look, I think this is a great matchup for him. I think the Steelers, they have the worst pass blocking grade in the league so far this season, 28.7. They've allowed a 43% pressure rate, which is the third highest. Somehow I've allowed just 3 sacks, at least their offensive line has. So I think we could get a Will Anderson sack this week. I think pressures and playing time are there for him. The matchup is there. I think we let Will Anderson rip this week against the Steelers O line.
Yeah, let him eat.
All right. I don't think there's too much more here for the Texans. We got Jimmy Ward back last week, which was nice to see. He was the first healthy Texans safety to return. He got a decent box roll there in week 3, 35%. We'll see if Jalen Petrie, who everyone paid heavily for this summer, returns and what his role looks like in D'Amico Ryan's defense, because we only got to see him on less than 50% of snaps in week 1 with no Jimmy Ward. So that'll be interesting to see if he gets back and how they deploy him. All right, let's go on to the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers. Starting here, with let's start at the safeties. I don't think we started, other than Kyle Hamilton, we started at the safeties. But Trayvon Merrick, the only thing I just wanted to note that he is surprisingly playing more in the box than Marcus Epps so far this season. I thought it might be, maybe a 2-week anomaly, but it does seem like that's how they want to deploy these guys going forward. Merrick has typically been one of the league's least effective IDPs, and he's not been that much better this year, but I did give him a slight bump in the ranks over Epps. Going forward, Merrick is safety 41 and Epps is like safety 47. So these are deep league options, really. Max Crosby, I have him as edge 4. He's questionable at the moment. He should avoid Rashawn Slater this week. Rashawn Slater's been one of the best pass blocking tackles in the league, but he plays left tackle. Crosby mainly lines up versus the right tackle, which is Trey Pipkins, who's been good, but not nearly as good as Rashawn Slater. So obviously we're starting Max Crosby. Not much else to say there. Let's talk about the linebackers though, Josh. Divine Diablo, I know he had a slightly better game than Robert Spillane last week, but this is one of those times, they happen every once in a while throughout the season, where the guy on the lower snap share outperforms the full-time guy. Spillane's not leaving the field. That's the main thing to pay attention to here. Unfortunately, El Diablo snaps fell to 84% in week 3 when he was up over 90% in the first 2 weeks. So will be another kind of one to monitor this week. What do you think about this Raiders linebacker group?
Man, it's frustrating because it kind of feels like another situation where the linebacker we're more excited about is not getting the opportunity. Feels a lot like the Commanders, where just the ho-hum average to below average guy is getting 100% of the snaps. In this case, it's Robert Spillane as opposed to Cody Barton. I rostered Diablo in the league I care most about, and I've been rolling him out. I haven't felt great about it, to be honest. He's been fine. Like he's been, pretty solid. But it's just disappointing overall because I had higher hopes that this was going to be Diablo's role with Spillane filling in as the LB2. So, just like Cody Barton, Robert Spillane is the guy you want because he's not sexy. He's not going to cost you a lot. He's not leaving the field. I want better things for Divine Diablo. Are we going to get that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe. This team stinks. Devontae Adams is about to burn the building down. Chandler Jones is being held at mental health facilities against his will. Like, I don't know what the hell. Josh McDaniels is thinking you need 2 possessions to get 8 points. I mean, who knows what could happen with this team, right? So it feels very unstable, but at least the evidence we have the first 3 weeks, Big Bob Spillane is a decent option. Again, not a guy that gets me excited at all, but a volume king. And that's what matters in IDP is volume.
Yeah, definitely. The Raiders, I don't know what they're doing over there. That you reminding me of that field goal decision late in that game just triggers me. It's swearing at the TV, and I don't even like the Raiders. So let's move on to the Chargers here. Let's start with the linebackers this time. Eric Kendricks should be back this week, I think, from what I've heard. So Kenneth Murray, though, has been a pretty fantastic fill-in somehow. I put him on the waiver wire targets after week 1 because he was playing 90% of snaps, even though he didn't do much production-wise week 1. But then Kendricks got hurt, missed 2 games, and Kenneth Murray has been on a tear. So we'll see if Kendricks is back this week. Again, it feels like it might be. If he's there, there's still potentially room for Murray to be a fantasy starter if that snap share stays around 90%. This defense has also been more zone heavy this year as well compared to last year, which we like to see. So that helps. But yeah, how do you feel about Kenneth Murray? Because this is a guy that we thought was dead and gone this offseason, but here he is being an IDP star.
Yeah, I think we even said on the pod, like, just ignore him. Pretend like he's not there. Like, this guy's a non-factor. I got to give him his props. The dude has been really, really good filling in for Eric Kendricks. But I compared him to like one of those cars that you kind of pull back and you let it go. It's like he can go fast in one direction and make some splash plays. But as Adam pointed out, the Vikings had some wide open rushing lanes last week because our homeboy picked the wrong hole to fill. So he's going to go fast in the wrong direction a lot of times. It just feels like you're playing with fire with Kenneth Murray. So I'm not particularly interested because I think he's a bad linebacker, and gambling on bad linebackers is, I think, bad practice. But hey, if you made that gamble the past 2 weeks, you're feeling great. But hopefully we can get Eric Kendricks back and, get back to some sense of normalcy with this linebacker group because, yeah, Kenneth Murray has filled in well, but he's not the answer. Hoping maybe at some point it can be Deion Henley season, but yeah, at least for these 2 weeks, Kenneth Murray has played well above expectations.
The only other thing from this game, Derwin James is dealing with a hamstring injury. He's potentially going to miss this game. We don't know. I'm leaving him as my safety 1 for the brand, obviously, but I'm not moving him from there until he's either doubtful or ruled out. But he did leave last game with the hamstring injury. JT Woods would be the next man up. And then I would probably move Alohi Gilman probably up the ranks a little bit versus JT Woods if I had to still pick a Chargers safety. Hamstrings continuing here because Joey Bosa also dealing with a hamstring. He's been on a pitch count the past 2 weeks. He's played just 29% of snaps in week 2, but he got 2 sacks. And then he played just 34% of snaps in week 3, but he got 1 sack. In week 1, he played 87% of snaps, and all he got was 1 lousy solo tackle. So he's like kind of the bizarro IDP of what we are constantly preaching. Somehow, the less he plays, the more productive he is. Truly a medical marvel, that Joey Bosa.
Yeah, just the worst possible superhero. I have been on record that I just don't want anything to do with Joey Bosa. I know he's a great NFL player. I know all the underlying metrics look great, but I'm just sick of this dude missing so much damn time with a myriad of injuries. I just don't want the headache. I don't want the hassle. So yeah, get better soon, Derwin. Joey, maybe go back to the witch that you got your powers from and see if you can reverse that deal and maybe play better with more snaps. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here, buddy.
It would be nice. It would be nice. All right, let's move on to the New England Patriots at the Dallas Cowboys. Where do you want to start with this one?
Not a lot in this one, man. Christian Barmore, John, I know this is your man crush.
Yeah.
Production is just not really there, though. I want more for Christian Barmore. The safeties in New England, nope, no thank you, move along. If you hate yourself and want to stress watch Patriots games on Sunday, I mean, Duggar and Peppers are your guys, but I don't roster Patriots as a rule because I'm a Colts fan. This goes back a decade plus practice for me. But so far it's worked out pretty well for IDP because short of Matthew Judon and maybe Juwan Bentley, he's been fine. Yeah. On the Dallas side, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, those dudes rock. Linebackers, another room to avoid. Leighton Vander Neck, no thank you. Damone Clark, no thank you. Those guys are fine. I'm not saying they're bad, but I don't know. That just feels like playing with fire. Again, something I'm not really wanting to do there, starting those guys. Donovan Wilson is back for the Cowboys, though. Another sneaky waiver ad, potentially, John. Sounds like he's primarily been the box safety in Dallas when he's been healthy.
Yeah, I think he was kind of eased back in last week. He played just 53% of the snaps. But at the good thing, I think, to see, because the first 2 weeks were kind of chaos with the Dallas safeties, we got at least some kind of return to their normal rotation from what we saw last year with this group. And I think as Wilson's snaps kind of increase too, it could potentially mean less opportunity for somebody like Damon Clark, considering that Wilson does play more in the box. And Damon Clark, like you said, not interested. He did have a decent game last week, but playing only 69% of snaps. And Van Der Esch 100%, but just super inefficient again, more as a result of this defense, more man heavy defense in the league. It just drains tackle efficiency for linebackers. But Donovan Wilson, if he can get back up to that 80 to 85% snap share, he could be a pretty solid IDP just purely because of the amount of time he plays in the box.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting safety option, especially if you've maybe had some guys that have been lost due to injury. It's a sneaky underrated thing to pay attention to players that start the year on PUP or are dealing with some kind of nagging injury, because they kind of get written off. They might get dropped, in shallower leagues. And so it's a underrated skill in IDP to not only pay attention to like depth charts and knows who like is the next man up is if there's an injury. It's also a superpower to know what guys are coming back from injuries and be the first one in there to get a waiver claim on them.
Yeah, definitely. That is key. And yeah, like you said, New England, not all that interesting. I do love Barmore. I thought he had a good week this past week, and it was nice to see
He did.
Billy Boy trust him as the lead defensive tackle, at least as far as snap shares goes, but cautiously optimistic, at least going forward. Hopefully that sticks. And then, yeah, Kyle Duggar, also decent week, got more of a box role again. Jabril Peppers taking over Adrian Phillips was not one I saw coming this season, but Peppers has played well, designated as a cornerback on RSO as well, so a little cheat code there, but decent role for him in Belichick's defense.
Yeah, I just don't trust Belichick. I think I
Yeah.
really do think he has it out for fantasy players of all types, but especially IDP, since defense is his bread and butter. Just no, thank you, Bill. I'm not going to play your game.
All right, let's go on to the Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. Zaven Collins got poked in the eye, didn't come back. He's still questionable. I don't really have any interest in Zaven Collins anyways. I know he had one game with kind of like a fluky interception, then got an unblocked sack last week. Just not someone that I think is doing enough pass rush wise to trust in most leagues. I'm pretty much completely out on Zaven. There are more interesting pass rushers that I'd rather target this year. Maybe he becomes something down the road, but not as much interest for 2023. I am interested in the Arizona linebackers, specifically Kaiser White. I mean, I'll start with maybe the guys that are playing behind him, because we know Kaiser White has the full-time role, but Josh Woods, Chris Barnes, both dealing with injuries. If both of those guys are out, Ezekiel Turner would be the next man up, which is kind of crazy because we talked about Owen Papo a lot this offseason, and it doesn't seem like he's even fourth on the depth chart, but it does seem like Josh Woods could be back. So if Woods and Barnes are playing, I'm not as interested in Woods for deeper leagues. If Barnes is out and Woods is in, then Woods becomes more interesting because you don't have the two of them kind of cannibalizing each other's snaps. But Kaiser White has been the real star. He's LB10 for me this week. Been incredibly productive through 3 weeks. Arizona has been a top 10 team in zone coverage deployment, and he's taken advantage of that by just racking up ridiculous tackle numbers. So love that for Kaiser White so far this season. How about you?
Yeah, Kaiser White is a must start, dude, which is like weird to say because it's Kaiser White and it's the Arizona Cardinals. I'm interested in this Victor Dimukeje guy. Just popped a little bit. We talked about him a little bit on the recap show. Had a question off of our YouTube channel, John. What's going on with BJ Ojolari?
Yeah, he's just not getting the playing time. I mean, look, he's a rookie as well, so Gannon potentially not trusting these guys, wants to get the experience out there on a team that he's trying to make compete. And look, it worked last week. They beat the Cowboys. So BJ
That's right.
Ojulari, wasn't somebody that I was necessarily excited about coming out. I didn't think he was as good of a pass rusher just yet. I think there's potential there, but I think he's going to be coming along slowly. I thought the only positive for him was the potential for playing time in this Arizona defense because there's not a lot of options on the edge. But if that's not there, then I just have zero interest in BJ Ojulari.
Yeah, let's move on to the 49ers.
Yeah.
This is a much more interesting team for IDP. We know Fred Warner. We know Dre Greenlaw. We've already talked about Dre. We have not forgotten that man. Nick Bosa, you're rolling him out. What do we think about the Week 1 wonder, Drake Jackson? How are we feeling about, Miss Jackson for Week 4?
Yeah, there's potential, I think, for Jackson. Sorry, I pulled up the wrong slide. But yeah, look, he's playing the second most snaps for the team. The pass rush metrics weren't even really there when he had that big blow up week in Week 1. So that was a little bit of a red flag, but the volume could potentially be there. Obviously, playing on that defensive line does help as well with guys like Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave, and Eric Armstead even kind of creating pressure and creating havoc as well. So look, they're going up against the Arizona offensive line that did limit the Cowboys defensive line to just 2 sacks last week, but we'll see if that will be a fluke or if the 49ers are going to wreck shop here. What do you think? Do you think the last week was a fluke against Dallas, or could we see San Francisco find a loophole there and destroy these guys?
I think that a demolition is possible, although I would put the 49ers and Cowboys on about equal footing in terms of quality as an NFL team. So I think this Cardinals team they're doing what we call the respectful tank. Mm-hmm. They're aiming for Caleb Williams, but they're going about it the right way. They're scrapping, they're fighting. But with bad teams that punch above their weight, sometimes they catch that uppercut and get knocked out cold on the canvas. So I could see San Francisco, who I think is the best team in the NFC right now, put the screws on these guys and beat them by, what they've won their first 3 games, like 30-10 or something. Yeah. They've scored 30 points in each of the first 3 games. So I could see like a 30-14 type kind of washout here for San Francisco and Arizona.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's move on to Sunday Night Football, the Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Jets. Josh, other than Taylor Swift, what is the most interesting thing about this game?
I mean, that's all my notes say is just Taylor Swift. So I got nothing else for this one. The Nick Bolton injury, he missed practice today, so keep an eye on his injury status throughout the week. If he's out, I'm happy to fire up Drew Tranquill. Mm-hmm. Willie Gay, Leo Chenal, man, just can't start him at this point. If Nick Bolton is back in, it's been a little dicey, John. I think there's been cause for concern with these Chiefs linebackers. Steve Spagnuolo's back in his bag of evil. The linebacker situation I think is pretty clear cut though. If Nick Bolton is in, unless it's like, oh, he'll be in, but he'll be on a snap count. If he's full go, you fire up Nick Bolton, you sit the rest down. If Nick Bolton is out, you start Drew Tranquill and you collect your 10 to 12 tackles and you're thankful for it. Trent McDuffie versus L'Jarius Sneed, John. I don't like this matchup. Give Johnny's Streaming Quarterbacks podcast a listen if you want to hear how putrid the Jets passing offense has been this season, especially when it comes to targeting their wide receivers. So I could see this split with L'Jarius Sneed playing the wide corner, Trent McDuffie getting that profitable kind of slot role that L'Jarius Sneed previously held. I could see this going one of 2 ways, John. It's a win-win because a playmaker like L'Jarius Sneed, even with the inferior alignment, his talent shines through, and it is a more profitable role for an ascending player like Trent McDuffie. Or it's a lose-lose because Sneed's talent can't compensate for his wide corner alignment, and McDuffie isn't good enough to deliver in that profitable role. Now, based on what we've seen going back to last season, I'm inclined to be optimistic and lean toward the former, where this is good for both guys, but that's a big question mark because L'Jarius Sneed has been one of the better DB assets, and in this new role, I really don't know what to expect moving forward rest of season.
Yeah, so this is I asked Joey this question too. He went Snead over McDuffie last week. I went McDuffie over Snead. Just because I tend to lean into the utilization more so than the player, and I still tend to lean Snead if I have to pick one, but I think both guys can be solid. Maybe not so much this week, like you said. The Jets' passing offense has not been ideal, but I still prefer Snead if I have to pick one, just because of the way they're using him. But still could be L'Jarius Sneed could still be very useful. And sorry, I said McDuffie is the one I prefer because of the utilization. But yeah, and then like you said, yeah, the Bolton injury to the linebackers, it makes it trickier because it's a Sunday night game, and obviously there's not 2 Monday night games this week, so there's less options if you have to replace them. But for guys that are waiting on Tranquil or Bolton, it just pays to pay attention to that practice report this week and see how things are trending. But as much as I don't like the matchup for the Chiefs corners, I do like it for the Chiefs defensive line. The Jets have allowed the highest pressure rate in the entire league. They're a bottom 10 pass blocking unit as far as the grades go. You got Zach Wilson out there searching for moms in the stands instead of paying attention to the pass rush. I think we could see George Karlaftis get home this week as well. He had just the half sack last week in like a really great matchup against Chicago, but he had a pretty dominant game. 42% pressure rate, 26% win rate. He definitely should have gotten more than a half sack there. So banking on him having a bigger week here against the Jets. How do you feel about Karlaftis?
I've liked Karlaftis going back to this offseason. I'm on record. I had him as a top 20 edge for this year. I just think the dude is good. I think we saw flashes. Didn't he play like 75% of snaps as a rookie? Some really solid, encouraging numbers. So, yes, I'm all over the Chiefs defensive line in this game. Chris Jones got a sack and got the hell out last week. They're like, that's enough from you, buddy. Go sit down. He's a must start every single week, but especially this week. Yeah, and then Karlaftis, he's averaging 13.1 points per game by our scoring, 78% of snaps. He's in that kind of Will Anderson bucket. He's like a tick above Will Anderson right now, like that edge 2-3 borderline. But yeah, in this matchup, I could see him as like a top 18 option, depending on, how you feel about his chances to go after the MILF Hunter and give him a big old hug in the backfield.
Yes, the MILF Hunter becomes the hunted in this one. On the Jet side of things, not an overly interesting group. Again, we kind of know what they are as far as linebackers go. Safeties, Tony Adams is hurt. We'll see if he comes back for this game, but if not, Adrian Amos is the replacement. But their defensive line is by far their most interesting position, and specifically Quinnen Williams. No sacks yet so far this year, and it's not a great matchup for him. Patrick Mahomes has only been sacked once this year. 12 pressures for Quinnen Williams so far on the year, 3 QB hits. So he's still delivered decent production for the position. He's DT9 in the PFF scoring that I use. Once he starts adding sacks to that as well, he's immediately back into that potential DT1 overall conversation. But are you worried at all about Quinnen Williams not getting any sacks?
Not even a little bit.
Right.
Nope. You just start this guy because he's arguably the best defensive tackle in the game right now. We've had this conversation many times. It is a loaded position right now. Probably the best it's been since I've been playing IDP. Defensive tackle is so deep. He's the top of that mountain for me, especially for IDP. You don't ever sit this guy down because, John, what happens if you sit him down?
He's going to go off for like 3 sacks.
Exactly. And do you want to be the idiot that has 3 sacks from Quinnen Williams on your bench because you tried to get cute and bench this guy? Don't be that guy, pal. Don't be that guy. Put Quinnen Williams in. It's going to pay off.
There you go. Wise words there. Let's move on to Monday Night Football. There's only one this week, thankfully. The Seattle Seahawks at the New York Giants. So I guess I'll start with Uchenna Nwosu because he had a really nice year last year, but really slow start this year. And I guess like not encouraging pass rush metrics so far this year. He hasn't earned a single game pass rush grade of even 60 so far this season, a 53.4 for the year. He does have 9 pressures, but it's been purely from volume at this point. He's playing 77% of the defensive snaps so far. All that said, he does draw the second worst pass blocking unit in the entire league with the Giants at 34.9. If he can't do it this week, or at least show signs of life in those underlying metrics, then how concerned are you about Uchenna and Wosu?
Yeah, I think you cut him loose.
Yeah.
I think it's hard because you want to hold on to what happened last season. And this is obviously context specific, right? Dynasty, you're not dropping this guy. But in your redraft leagues where there's other guys that are performing better out there on waivers, even if you're not cutting him loose, you're sitting him down. I think this is the last week where I'm giving Uchenna a free pass in my lineup to see if he can turn things around. I am worried, and I think there's another guy in this matchup we'll talk about too that's kind of in the same boat. And again, depth specific. If you don't have a deep bench, for example, I could see a situation where some managers are cutting Uchenna loose. And we knew he was a prime regression candidate, considering we really hadn't seen that other than maybe like the last half of his last season with the Chargers, what we saw in Seattle. So it didn't feel like, I think Adam asked at one point, is this the best season Uchenna Nwosu is ever going to have? It's possible. Yeah. I think he's a good player, but that kind of production was eye-popping for a reason, because that's not what he typically had done up to that point in his career. So I think there will be weeks during the season where he pops off for a sack or two, but man, this is the get-right matchup, Uchenna, so come through for us. Don't make us push that button to sit you down or drop you, brother. We don't want to do it.
Yeah, don't make us take you out behind the shed like that's old right. Yeller.
Like old Yeller and put you down.
That's it. The other things here in Seattle, I mean, Jordan Brooks, we know that this guy, eventually he's going to get back up to that full-time role. He's just been a tackle machine so far, 32 tackles in 3 games, hasn't even cracked a 90% snap share yet. He's been unbelievable, but we've talked about him already on this show quite a few times. I know you've talked about him as well. So the only other interesting thing I think with the Seahawks, Jamal Adams finally seems like this is the week that he'll be playing and back in the lineup, at least from what the team has said. They said that they're going to fully unleash him without limitations. That's their quote, which means that, I think, at least to me, it means that it's going to come at the cost of someone else who has been contributing this year. Julian Love stands out as the first. Oh, I got the wrong slide up there, but Julian Love stands out as the first potential casualty, I think, as he's been a great IDP so far. I think it would be a big blow because he's been awesome for IDP, but he's playing that Jamal Adams role in this defense. I mean, maybe Quandre Diggs who could be the guy that Love can replace, and then Adams can replace Love, because Diggs has had a really terrible start to the year. He has a 33.4 defensive grade, 33% missed tackle rate as well. So maybe the team wants to limit him. I don't know. But I'm interested to see what this looks like this week. I am worried that Adams is going to cut into Julian Love snaps just because he's currently playing that box heavy, strong safety role in Seattle's defense.
Yeah, you got to set Love down just this week. Yeah. He's been great, so it does suck. But, I'm kind of on the corner that Johnny the Greek occupies, where it's like, just don't take unnecessary risks with your lineup, right? We know Jamal Adams is going to have some kind of role on this defense, and if you follow kind of what his role has traditionally been, Love is the one that is on the chopping block in terms of opportunity to make way for Adams. Now, hopefully maybe it's Quandre Diggs that gets shoved off to the side, but that doesn't seem to fit with what Jamal Adams is good at. So, and keep in mind too, even if Adams does cut into that workload, it's Jamal Adams. This dude's been banged up as much as Shaq Leonard and Joey Bosa over the years. So there's a chance that even if Love does lose some playing time now, don't panic, because Jamal Adams could be on the shelf with another injury here soon. So, yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. to have that primo opportunity snatched away from Julian Love. But I'm optimistic that he's going to still be IDP relevant, even with Adams back in the mix. We just need to see how it plays out. So don't fire him up this week. Don't fire up Adams this week. Just stay away and let's see what happens.
Definitely. All right, let's finish it off here with the New York Giants. Anything specific that you want to talk about here with the Giants?
The linebackers, I mean, Bobby Okereke is a fine like LB2 option. He's been a little underwhelming for the opportunity I think he was getting. Micah McFadden has been outshining him at times, so that tells you all you need to know about how Bobby Okereke managers are feeling. And then, yeah, Kayvon Thibodeau, man, he is sort of the Giants equivalent of Uchenna Nwosu for me in this game because highly drafted. He was inside the top 12 ADP for us this year, this offseason. So high expectations for Kayvon Thibodeau, and he just has not delivered on that thus far this season. So same question you posed to me, I'll pose to you. What do we do with Kayvon Thibodeau if this guy doesn't get right this week?
Yeah, so Thibodeau was one that I think we maybe even opened the show talking about him last week. And I mentioned that he did have a decent shot to get a sack last week. He did get one, but not great pass rush grade so far this year. Just a 51.5 pass rush grade, which ranks 115th among edge defenders. So might be a bit of a sophomore slump here for Thibodeau. I'm not panicking on him for dynasty purposes, but if he continues to have like this poor of a showing as far as the underlying metrics goes, you kind of have to move on, right? There's other options out there. I mean, look at Byron Young, who's doing it on a 92% snap share. We're not really getting that much snaps for Thibodeau. I mean, he's getting a decent snap share, but not 92%, obviously, where we can rely on the volume so much. But I have faith that he'll get there at some point. But for the time being, most redraft rosters, they need the roster space. So you can move on from this guy if he continues to be inefficient.
Yeah, it's hard to say because he is a talented player. I think there is promise. I think this guy is going to be one of those dominant edge rushers for a long time in the league. We may just be a year early on it. You know, we may have gotten a little cute this offseason and put the cart before the horse with Kayvon. So hoping for the best with this guy. But yeah, we need to see it this week, or I'm afraid homeboy is going to be on the bench or on your waivers.
That's right. But yeah, that's it, man. We did it. Another full week of games that we've gone through. Another massive IDP weekly preview episode. I hope you all found that helpful. If you did, please give us a like on the YouTube. It helps us a lot, and I personally greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. A huge thank you to the man, Josh Raymer. Joshy, thank you so much for doing this with me. I am really glad we got to get you on here to dive into that beautiful IDP mind again.
John, we always have fun when we get to pod together. We've been doing this now for a long time, which is kind of crazy to think about. Your backwards hat wearing days on the Big Three IDP podcast. You've come a long way, my friend. 2 hours plus of IDP goodness, folks. If you're, for some reason, a non-IDP player who made it to the end of the show and you're listening to this, it's because we're passionate about this game of IDP fantasy football. And if you've never given IDP a try, you should. Don't be scared. You've got guys like John. You've got guys like us. There are so many great resources out there to help make this game a little bit easier to understand, a little bit less scary. So come give it a try. Dip your toe in the water. You're going to find it's just fine. And you might enjoy fantasy football a lot more if you give it a shot.
Beautiful. I'm going to clip that and make a commercial of it because it's very well said, Josh. Before you go, please let the good folks know where they can find more of you and everything that you got going down over at the IDP show.
Yes, sir. TheIDPshow.com. We are cranking out articles and rankings. We've got Johnny the Greek over there. We've got Jace Abbey doing weekly rankings. We've got our waiver article going up Monday night. Jake Colhagen is doing starts and sits. Our boy Lee Andrews, who is pioneering some cutting-edge ACL repair technology and surgeries, is doing the weekly Banged Up podcast looking at IDPs who popped up on Friday's injury report. You can find other shows like this out there. You cannot find one that does it for IDP. So check that out. It's in the IDP After Show feed, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. Jace does a weekly episode breaking down his rankings with someone from the industry. Johnny's in there talking cornerbacks. Myself, Adam, and Bobby, we do the weekly recap for the IDP show, and then Evan Ronda and Jake Colhagen do our weekly previews. So yeah, come check us out. Subscribe on YouTube. We've got videos and shorts going up every day. Just trying to make IDP entertaining and fun. That's always been our goal, John. Entertain, then inform. So we're going to make you laugh. Going to make you probably roll your eyes. We are like mid-30s dads after all, so the dad humor is strong. But we're going to have a fun time, man. That's the goal. We want to have fun playing IDP because this is a fun game.
Yeah, man, I'm with you for sure. And yeah, great content over there on the IDP show. So if you aren't familiar, definitely go check that out. And a lot of great names over there to pay attention to that are doing great work in the IDP world. And we'll have a lot of them on the on this show in the coming weeks as well, which is great. So just continuing to explore the wonderful minds of IDP here. As for me, you can always find my written work over on pff.com, which includes the IDP fantasy report every single week, breaking down the usage for every single IDP with waiver targets and much more. My IDP rankings will be up on the site in article form by the time most people are listening to this or watching this. I also have the wide receiver man and zone coverage report that drops every Thursday morning. A ton of great wide receiver nuggets and matchup data in there to pour over, as well as the O-line D-line matchup article, which comes out every Friday. Again, thank you to everyone who checks out those articles, who has listened to the pod. I will be back tomorrow previewing the other side of the ball with the great Kate Majuk. So join me again for that.